Hey, everybody, welcome to Shelf Shuffle, a mix of must reads here at the Book Fest. I am joined today by Craig, Kelly, Mick, and Bill, and we're going to talk about some of their books and what they're into, what they're up to, and just, have a little bit of fun. First off, Craig, tell us about your book. Give us that little elevator pitch and let everybody know what you're writing about and what they should be reading.
Sure. My name's Craig. I write horror for Hachette book publishing group, and before that, I wrote for Simon and Schuster. I also do a lot of self-publishing stuff in the small genres like the World War II genre, military genres. The novel that I'm talking about today is episode 13. It was published by Hachette last year, and it's about a ghost hunting reality TV crew that goes into a notoriously haunted house, only to discover the house wants something in return.
So supernatural ghost facers are showing up here. I like it. Yes. Kelly, I understand that the book you wanted to talk about today is book 2 of a series. Tell us what that's all about.
Yeah, so the name of my series is Arcanum, and book 2, Whispers in the Forest, will be released in May. Book 1, In the Temple Shadows, came out last summer, and it's basically a love story, but it's the story of 5 souls that travel through all time and space throughout history, through past lives, in order to unite the soulmates. But what's unique to this story is I'm a tarot card reader by my career, and I channeled this entire story using my cards. So it was based on my own past lives, what I was told, whether it's true or not, I probably will never know until I pass away from this lifetime. Right. So it's just a 6-book series to see if the lovers can finally find their happily ever after at the end of the series.
Oh, I love this concept. That is cool. Awesome. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is really cool. Super awesome. Bill, what do you have for us today?
I am very excited about my first book, 6 to Carry the Casket and 1 to Save an Ass. It's going to be published. It's a series of essays about identity and life and moving forward. So the first part of the book is essays about my formative experiences, family, friends, coming to understand myself, know the world around me. Second part is sort of what I did with the identity that was given to me and how I've started to shape it myself. The third part, I really focus on my queer identity. And so I return to books and movies and TV shows and people, celebrities who helped me or gave me language to shape my own queer identity and navigate the world.
This is definitely a relevant book for right now. And I think a lot of people will probably, find some solace in it, to be honest. So awesome that it's also your first book. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations. And Mick, what do you have for us today?
Well, this is also my first book, and it's called Mellow Your Money, How to Surf the Market and Build Wealth without stressing yourself out. And, there's so much noise out there. And of course, we could talk about current events, but it goes back and goes forward. And there's always something out there to excite people and get people nervous about their money.
Oh, yeah.
And I look back at my career and I said, it never stopped. And yet, if you take a step back and focus on the long term, you really can reduce the stress that money has in our lives. And so I took a look at my own stories and how I learned to hopefully de-stress and hopefully do it in a fun and funny way in my book. I didn't want a textbook. There's plenty of textbooks on how to invest. And so I kind of made mine, hopefully a more readable and more fun way of looking at the stock market.
I love it. This is awesome. So a couple of fiction writers, a couple of nonfiction. All righty then. So who wants to start by telling our listeners and viewers, how you guys got started in the genres that you did?
I'll start.
I warned you I wasn't going to ask easy questions. Go ahead, Kelly.
So I came to tarot as a career through, the circuitous events in life. And, we tend not to look for solutions unless there's a problem. So needless to say, tarot was a solution that I found to a time in my life that was challenging. And I built this global business where I work with clients all over the world now. It's kind of more like life coaching, but when we were all in our homes in 2020, I decided to, just in order to kill time, to look at past lives. Just the concept of it, what the energy is around it, things like that. And so what was birthed in this experience, and it's all videotaped, the entire experience, is this just rich story of all of these timelines and these same, like I said, these same 5 souls that are traveling through time and space. And I realized this had to be like birthed into some sort of creative project. I've never written a book before. And so I just kind of, with a lot of pouting and a lot of soul searching, sat down at my computer and wrote book 1 in the Temple Shadows. And then like I said, I just completed book 2. So it's well underway.
Now, do you have a favorite tarot deck to read from? Just curious.
It's kind of like asking me if I have a favorite child, which I know sounds odd because it's an inanimate object. But yes, to answer Beth, if I had to choose one, I know which one I would choose.
Awesome. Perfect. Bill, tell us a little bit more about, what really prompted you to start writing these short essays and really, start researching your own identity. What was there some, catalyst, or was it just more of a, I need to do this kind of thing?
Yeah, I think there were several catalysts, actually. Over the course of about a year and a half during 2015, 2016, I experienced major grief. Both of my parents and one of my siblings died within a very short span. And that was a lot to carry for the whole family. And since then, I was also working as a middle school principal, which was the hardest job that I'd ever had. And so all this grief and all the challenges of the work, and I broke, I burned out. And so I took some time off starting in 2019 to reset and find a way forward and figure out what I was going to do next. And then 2020 happened. And, between the pandemic and the social strife that we were going through, everything that 2020 unleashed, it gave me a different lens to really look back at how I landed in burnout. How did I get here, and how will I move forward? So I used what I was experiencing in 2020 to start writing brief reflections, just prompted by something I saw in the news, a memory that would come up. I wanted to revisit something. And so that was really how that originated. So between grief and searching for some meaning during this time of terrible crisis, it prompted me to go in and understand both how I was constructed, but also to find a lot of joy to bring forward. What were the memories that I wanted to survive this period? What did I want to bring forward, shape myself with, and shape the world with? So that's how it started.
2019 and 2020 seem to be the 2 years where a lot of creative things kind of shifted for everyone. It's kind of like, it was almost like, the world telling us, hey, you need to refocus yourselves a little bit. Because I know I did some serious refocusing in 2019 and 2020 as well. So, totally get that. Craig, so tell us a little bit more about this book and how you got started on it.
So how did I get into horror, which was the original question, or specifically?
Yeah, how did you get into horror? Tell
okay.
us about that, because there's got to be a good story with that one.
Well, yeah, I mean, it wasn't a first love of mine for fiction. And it's funny to tell people that, I write horror, because you get all sorts of different kind of reactions. It's like the proverbial serial killer. Like, he was such a nice, mild-mannered guy. I never thought he wrote horror. But horror is an emotion. It's not really a genre, and it's a very big tent. And one of the things we've seen with diversity in the field is we've seen this transition between old school horror, which was a lot more dependent on splatterpunk, and now it's much more the bigger tent, bigger ideas, more diversity of perspectives, and that's all been really positive for it. And I give probably Jordan Peele and Mike Flanagan the most credit for popularizing horror again, and saying, the New York Times was doing mental acrobatics, trying to figure out a way to call horror, say they like horror without calling it horror. They were like, it's elevated horror. This is not actually horror. We hate that still. But so Jordan Peele, I think, did the most there in kind of popularizing it. But how I fell into it is I grew up in the 80s on a farm, and I read a lot of Robert E. Howard and wish fulfillment stuff for teen boys, and wanted to be a writer. And then through the 90s was doing a lot of sci-fi stuff. But when you're writing it back then in the publishing industry, it was like living in a Kafka novel where you got this gilded invitation to attend a party you weren't allowed in, yes. And that's exactly what it was like for about 10 years for me, plugging away. And I almost gave up. And then I had read this novel called Eagle in the Snow about the last Roman legion on the Rhine. And I thought, what if they were soldiers and instead of the German tribes, it was zombies? And so I wrote this crazy zombie novel, army versus zombie novel, on a lark, got picked up by small press, and it exploded. And, success in publishing is always work as hard as you can, learn stuff, work as hard as you can, get stuff out there. And then the biggest factor is X, which is luck. And I had the right book at the right place at the right time. Walking Dead was coming out at the time. And so I ended up, that exploded. I wrote some more zombie books. And then from there, I was able to leverage that up into an agent. And then the agent got me into Simon & Schuster with a horror novel, which was a natural extension of writing zombies. And so that's how I ended up getting into it. And, once you're in something, it's very easy to get typecast, and the publishers like to see you there. They don't, I'm like, I can write sci-fi too. And they're like, yeah, horror is good though. And so that's kind of how the business works, but I don't mind because it's a small community. It's a really, it's a wonderful community. The reading community is fantastic. And it allows me to write about ordinary people in extraordinary situations and see what they're made of, which is what I really like to do, regardless of where it exactly fits on the genre scale.
Now, what is your favorite horror trope?
Favorite horror trope? Well, the horror trope that inspired, never ask me what my favorite is, or I'll hog the panel for the rest of the hour. But I can tell you the trope that inspired episode 13 was, well, there were two. One was the idea of a house within a house, like the movie His House, the novel House of Leaves, Angel of Darkness. There are a lot of media that have covered this type of concept, and I've always been fascinated with it. And then the other trope is found footage horror. This is an epistolary novel. It's told in mixed media by left behind by the investigators. And I pitched that to the editor because I knew he was into found footage. And then he said, yes, I love that idea. Write it. And then I was like, oh my God, what have I done? Because I don't even like epistolary. And now I'm writing it, but I found
you're writing it. Yep.
Yeah. But I found a way to do it, to balance that fly on the wall with intimacy of the characters, which you usually don't get in found footage. So I found a way to balance that. And it's really neat. Like the novel just rolls. Every time you're done with a chapter, there's some other different type of media and perspective and events and reveals that kind of keep you turning pages and exploring the mystery.
That sounds interesting. I'm definitely gonna have to check that one out. So awesome. So Mick, talk to me about this. Talk to me about this this book. How did you decide on which particular financial subjects you wanted to add to it?
Well, what I found, and ironically, I some people would say writing about the stock market is kind of a horror book too, but I tried to avoid that. But what I found, I've been in the business for 40 years, and what I found in talking to people over time is, first of all, what they identify with is stories with experiences. Most people don't want to hear these, and I don't either, by the way. You hear these economists on TV trying to espouse this and that, and I wish, Kelly, they used your tarot cards, because They don't know what they're talking about. It's very hard to predict the future without an imagination. And what I found through the years is that's what it takes. It's not a numbers game. It's an emotional game. When I was in college, my worst subject was statistics. And in fact, I was encouraged to go to the drop office after my midterm in statistics. But what I really loved was Russian literature. I loved the emotion of those novels. And what I found through the years is it's really emotion. It's really learning about yourself and understanding yourself that is really the key to being able to invest over the long term. You can read how to invest, but as soon as something bad happens, some horror or whatever it would be, you tend to lose focus. And so what I try to do is give my own misadventures through the years and how I learned to be calm in stressful situations, and hopefully do it in a fun way so that people could identify with my own stories, my own learning process, and how I learned to kind of maneuver through the markets in a easier way, and hopefully show people they don't need to know numbers, they don't need to focus, they don't need to watch TV every day to look at whatever economic thing is being talked about. And anyway, that was my goal, and it was a lot of fun to kind of look back at my life and see what taught me the most lessons. And sometimes they were life lessons that taught me about the market, and sometimes it was actually market lessons that taught me about my life. So
interesting. So did you have any problems writing it, or did you what kind of process did you go through to take this subject, which a lot of people don't know a lot about? I mean, I'll be the first one to tell you, I hear them talking about finance stuff on TV and I zone out.
Me too, by the way.
Probably 95% of us. He said, Bill's holding up his hand like, hey, count me in. What kind of process did you use to make this book so much more interesting than the boring financial textbooks and the statistics books Right.
I kind of tried to start at the beginning. At what was my first lesson? What were the first things I learned? And I had a eccentric woman that was assigned to me as the first client. I had to buy her a car, but over time, we became connected, and she was very eccentric. And in the end, she actually outperformed everybody because she didn't care about what her earnings were. She just wanted to give money away. She cared about her income. And so we didn't do anything with her stocks. And we called it the fun strategy of benign neglect. Let the stocks go and don't trade like we were doing for all the other clients. And ironically, Eloise was doing the best at the end of the year. By doing nothing, she outperformed. So it was really looking back at stories like that early in my career, and then throughout, mistakes I made with trading and such that taught me lessons. So it became kind of a memoir of stories that happened through my life. And it was very therapeutic and very helpful to me to kind of learn, what were the key stories in my life that were teaching me lessons. It was, trying to get past some situations with my own dad, all the competition that was going on between us at an early life. And that led to me competing. And believe me, if you try to compete with the market, you will lose. And so working through that situation with my dad and working through that through therapy and such really helped me become a better investor. So it was all these type of stories starting almost at the beginning to lead me through the stories. It was a really fun process.
That's good. I'm glad to hear that you enjoyed the process through it, because we all know writing a book is not the easiest thing on the face of the earth. Which leads me to Bill. I have a question for you. Did you start your writing journey maybe writing journals, or how did you decide you wanted to tell the story, seeing as how it is such a personal one?
No, I've never been a journaler. Isn't that funny? I wrote a memoir of personal essays about my experiences, but journaling has never really been a meaningful practice for me. instead, when I was facing all this grief, I was facing life transitions. I wanted to make sense of the world around me. I went back to not old, but different modes of reflection, different methods of reflection that I'd picked up or been exposed to over time. And I started to use those to kind of critically look at my experiences. Methods like storytelling, as Mick was talking about. Storytelling is a really wonderful way, easy way to make meaning, because the way that we tell the story, the details we add, the things that we remember, the things that we forget, the things that we choose to forget, they all influence the kind of meaning that we can make from an experience. And I really looked back to my mom's example as a storyteller. She was a great storyteller, but I think for her, storytelling wasn't nostalgia or just fun facts. It was preserving and shaping, family culture and our history, and taking that seriously, but also having a lot of fun with it. I also returned to methods of reflection that I picked up in school along the way. In grad school, one of my professors wasn't convinced that even her graduate students could reflect without opining or getting really academic about it. And so she offered a method of reflection connecting our experiences, personal experiences, to abstract ideas or to philosophical or theological insights. So I returned to modes like this to investigate, kind of excavate the meaning that was buried in experiences that I'd forgotten about, or things that had been burdening me for a long time, or also things that were great joys. Going back to really powerful moments or really lovely moments with different people in my life, and looking at those experiences with this critical eye. That was really the origin. So instead of journaling, instead of anything like that, it was for me an exercise in ongoing reflection and ongoing seeking dialogue with people. And I don't think that's different from anything I've done in my career as an educator. And now I'm designing rituals, and I officiate a lot of weddings. And I think of this writing and this book is itself an extension of the same kind of dialogue, same kind of meaning making that I've been seeking to do in a lot of different corners of my life.
Nice. I like that. I like that a lot. Now, Craig, you said you used to write sci-fi. What was the influence behind your sci-fi writing? How far does your love of sci-fi go back?
Well, yeah, to high school during the first years, I wanted to be a writer. Robert E. Howard was hugely influential on me during my formative years, and it's like Colson Whitehead says, you read and read to find out what kind of writer you want to be, and then you write and write to find out what kind of writer you are. And so my first novels were me trying to be Robert E. Howard, were trying to be me trying to be Stephen King or Chuck Palahniuk, and then eventually you find your own voice through practice and to keep at it. But back then, horror was very small. Wasn't even on my radar in the bookstore. It was a very small part of the bookstore. So fantasy and sci-fi was going through a heyday at the time, back in the 80s and early 90s, and so that's kind of what attracted me. I like story, but I like that fantastic element that forms a dramatic foil for the story itself. And which is the essence of what makes, I think, Stephen King popular to this day, is he builds such a grounded world with grounded real people, and then he throws in this werewolf or something, and now you see what happens, and that you get to see what everybody's made of. And so I was always really fascinated by that aspect of it, because there was always some imaginative, fantastic element. And then I was also always drawn to the idea of crisis, people in crisis, because I grew up in the 70s. So, Towering Inferno, Mega Man, the S hitting the fan type of movies.
Oh, yes.
And all that stuff was just a delight for a kid like me. And kind of carried it forward into my early writing career. So, I would say those were the things that were a big influence on my love of sci-fi and fantasy. They made me think. They really pushed my imagination, and I thought they were just more dramatic.
Are you a fan of some of the bigger writers like Tolkien and Herbert, or do you like some of the more esoteric writers that are out there?
Well, they were popular back when I was reading pulp, so
Mm-hmm.
I wanted like, swords and lots of blood. And it was just, I was like 15. So no, I wasn't into like real heavy text. And then by the time I got into the 90s where I was starting to mature as a reader and then
Mm-hmm.
start to the process of maturing as a writer, becoming a writer really, that back in the 80s those books would have been pretty heavy lifting for me, and so I liked them. But then I started to read Tolkien, and I was about 50 pages in and still reading about like elderberry bushes, and I just I was like, I want some action. I'm a Robert E. Howard reader, give me some action. And then the same thing with Dune. I felt like by the time I was really exposed to it, I was already overexposed to the story through like so many adaptations. And so I've actually never picked up Dune. And every time I'm in the bookstore, I kick myself.
Really?
So yeah, one of these days I'll have to just dive into it and just enjoy the prose. I just feel like I've just been completely overexposed to that one. I'm now on my third adaptation of it watching.
Oh yeah, same here. And I still go back to that particular book because it is just one of the best sci-fi books out there in my opinion. So
undisputed. I would agree with that even without reading it. I just think it's so the story itself is so imaginative and powerful.
Yeah. So Kelly, have you read anything lately that you just couldn't put down? One of those books that you found that you had to read from start to finish?
Oh my God, I just reread The Alchemist, which I read in one day yesterday. So
nice.
There's that.
Okay.
But that's always a classic, easy, worthwhile read. But as for something new that I've read that I couldn't put down, let me think. To be honest, I haven't had a chance to read that much of late. But I would have to say the last book that I picked up that I really just had a binge read with was Rebecca Yaros's second book in her Fourth Wing series. I think I can't remember what the title was of the second book. But again, just kind of that fantastical adventure, saga type read that is a good influence for me to read as a writer of that kind of genre, but still very different because it's a bit more of a different demographic. But I enjoyed that.
Do you find yourself when you do pick up a book with bestsellers like Rebecca Yaros's notwithstanding, do you find that you read more within the genre that you write or less within the genre that you write?
Oh God, that's such an interesting question. Probably less, because I'm not a big romance reader, and my books have an element of romance to them, even though it's kind of more of a paranormal romance element. I'm more of, spy intrigue, the old Robert Ludlum's, Tom Clancy's, just a lot of, to me, real world, like that type of genre. Those authors were always the ones that I would pick up.
Okay.
Yeah. So no, I'm not a traditional romance reader.
Mick, what about you? What do you prefer to read when you're reading for pleasure?
Yeah, I'm kind of in that spy and some lawyer books, but actually the last book that I really enjoyed was, I believe it was Frederick Bachman who wrote A Man Called Ova, and he just wrote a book called Anxious People. And it's just a fascinating book of this. You can't even describe what it's about. It's kind of about a bank robbery that's not a bank robbery, and all these disjointed people come together, and it's just the emotions that they face, and kind of gets back to what I really enjoy in my reading, whatever the genre is. It's the emotions that people go through, and how they learn from their lessons. And that's kind of how I learned, is through my experiences. And that was a great book of experiences coming together. And but I will throw this out: the one of the greatest investment books I've ever read, maybe the only one, was written about 100 years ago from a guy named Jesse Livermore, who talked about his trading experiences. And amazingly, 100 years ago, human emotions never change. And so, yes, the market's different, and we could say there's 100 differences in how people trade, but emotions don't change, and that's what he's talking about back then. And the lessons he's learned back then are appropriate even today. And he does it in a very memoir kind of way. And I think it's great lessons for people about the market. And if there's somebody I tried to model after, though, I think his is the classic.
Yeah, I was going to ask.
Maybe 100 years from now, somebody will say, "Oh, yeah, that Mellow Your Money was okay." But I don't know. The human emotions part of things has always driven me to read, whether it's that or just whether it be horror or anything else or Kelly, your book sounds fantastic too.
I know it does. It does. So all of your books sound great. Seriously, I'm going to be looking everybody up. Bill, what about you? What is your favorite genre of book to read?
Oh, I don't know if I have a single favorite. I do love I do love short form essays. Maybe my own book is inspired by someone like David Sedaris. I go back to his writing frequently. So his collections about his family, his experiences, and the way he weaves humor into it. I love it. I get a lot of joy from that. I also love to read really rich fiction. Now, I will say the technical act of reading is really hard for me. So audiobooks have opened a whole new door. So I just finished listening to Niall Williams' The Time of the Child. And it was read by this Irish actor, and it's about this fictional town in Ireland, maybe mid-20th century, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful story. And with the actors reading through it, it's also wonderful. I also really love reading nonfiction. I love both continuing to study culture and ritual and things like that. I'm getting really into queer history, trying to find as much as I can. And I just started a book by Elisa Max Goodman called Glitter and Concrete. It's a history of drag in New York City. And
nice.
I think it's already just 50 pages in, and it's a really fascinating retrieval of history that has maybe been lost or pushed aside or absorbed into other forms of performance or other pieces of culture. So it's a really great intro to that history.
Awesome. Right now, speaking of reading like historical accounts and everything, I'm currently reading Book of Five Rings by Miyamoto Musashi, because I'm getting set to write a book that takes place in feudal Japan. So I understand that love of the research and everything else. So, all right. So let's go with a couple of just quick things here. Real fast. We'll just go right around from Craig back to Bill. If your book was adapted into a TV or movie, who would you want to play your main character?
Geez, I don't know. You had to make me go first on that one. Actually, in the tradition of found footage, I would say it should be, relative unknowns, just to convey the authenticity. One of the things with epistolaries, you always want to create that little Blair Witch sense of wonder that maybe this is real, even though it isn't. Maybe it is, and you want that sense of wonder that adds a nice layer on top of the reading experience for epistolarian. So yeah, I would go with relative unknown actors. That would be my out of that question.
Kelly?
Rebecca Ferguson.
All right.
That's easy for me because I envisioned this as a show, as a series way before I envisioned it as novels. So
perfect. Mick, I'll leave you for last for a minute. Bill, what about you?
Well, it's about me. So who do I want to play me in the movie? I've always thought James Marsden would be a great me on film. Kind of a mix of, he's got a serious look, but he's also a great singer. And I'm always singing all the time. It's actually amazing we've made it this far, and I haven't broken into song yet.
Oh,
But a
hey,
lot of the
feel
book is
free.
also about a lot of the book is also about my mother, and she was a pretty unique person. If you know Siobhan McSweeney, she played Sister Michael on Dairy Girls, you know, the school principal on Dairy
Yes.
Girls.
Yes.
Wow.
There's something about her
Yeah.
dry wit and her timing. It was my mom to a T,
Mm.
except for the whole, you know, she's a nun and a Catholic school principal. But other than that, I think she'd be a great one to play my mom.
All right. Now, Mick, if you can't think of how you would want this to be a movie, who would you want to read the audiobook?
Oh, that's interesting. Well, I was going with the movie first. I was going with Adam Sandler, and
Oh my gosh, yes.
and I thought that might be a little surprise, but you know, the comedic way he has about himself,
Mm-hmm.
and the stories that I have in the book, I think he would kind of bumble through, and I think people would have fun with it. And yet, in many of his movies, there's a lesson that kind of you glean through the end. And I think that would be how I'd like to pass these investment lessons on, is through comedy and through funny. And oh, by the way, now we know how to invest a little better. And maybe he, hopefully like me, would learn his life lessons by the end of the book too. So,
oh, that would be awesome. I could see that. All right. Well, we're getting close to time, guys. So let's let our viewers and readers know what you have coming down the pipe after the wonderful books we just talked about. Craig?
Well, another novel has come out since episode 13. It's called How to Make a Horror Movie and Survive, and it's basically a love letter to filmmaking and the horror genre in the heyday of the slasher era in the 80s. So it's about a horror movie director who's at the top of his game, but he's disappointed because his movies are fun and they should be truly horrifying. So he discovers a haunted camera that allows him to kill. It kills anyone he cares about. That is the catch. And so it's basically about him making the perfect horror movie. And it's about the scream queen he loves who wants to survive the night. And then this July is my next release from Hachette, which is called My Ex, the Antichrist. And it's another epistolary novel. It's the oral history of a rock band, which has a lead singer whose ex-boyfriend is the literal biblical Antichrist. And so they have to fight him, and you know, can rock and roll save the world is basically the dramatic question of the book.
I like that. All right. Kelly, what about you? What have you got coming out next?
Well, as I said, book 2, Whispers in the Forest in the Arcanum series, will be released in May of 2025. And then I've just recently started book 3, which, while it doesn't have a set title yet, does take place in the Vatican in the late 1400s, early 1500s. And that will be released in 2026.
Nice. Now, just real quick, have you ever thought about writing any sort of tarot guide?
To be honest, I really have, Beth, but there's so many good ones out there. I mean, there are probably, 250,000 books on tarot, and
for sure.
And I'd say that's over 60% of them are really good. So I would rather refer people to a book that I admire and would find worthwhile, depending upon why they're seeking tarot knowledge, versus actually writing that book.
There you go. Bill, what about you? What's coming up next after this book?
It's not quite a book, but I like to make space for other folks to be able to make meaning. And I offer guided meditation on Tuesday afternoons via Zoom.
Nice,
So
okay.
that's an open invitation to anybody who needs a little peace and quiet and wants to make a little space for themselves. I'm also working on a book about weddings, sort of a different approach to designing a ceremony, designing a wedding celebration, and rethinking, reframing what marriage is and what a ritual can do to communicate that. Those are the big projects right now.
I feel like you and Kelly would make a great collaboration book on, with your two expertise. I really, that would be something I would be interested in reading, like maybe, something meditative tarot guide, because I haven't found one I like yet. And Mick, what do you have coming up after this wonderful romp into the financial markets?
Well, I haven't really started the book, but I've been thinking of this whole mellow theme as something. And so I thought maybe mellow your parenting, or God forbid, mellow your politics. And so anyway, I thought maybe this mellow theme is something the world needs a little bit, but I haven't started anything yet.
Well, we will keep an eye out for the follow-up, the mellowing follow-up that's going to happen, because I feel like it's going to happen well. Well, guys, I appreciate you coming on here and sitting with me and getting your books out there to our readers and listeners. I appreciate you all, and congratulations on the first books. I look forward to seeing what all you gentlemen come up with more. Kelly and Craig, I will be checking out both of your novels because they sound fantastic and right up my alley as well. For the Book Fest, I am Beth A. Freely, your moderator, and thanks for joining us, and you all have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks.